In my previous video, I covered the teams in the NFL that were surprisingly good this season, which ended up being a pretty short video because ultimately there weren't too many of them. However, on the other end of the spectrum, there were more disappointments than surprisingly good teams in 2024.
This organization now, it's 14 straight years without making the playoffs. That's almost hard to do.
What's the question?
Well, can you reflect on that and just why?
I mean, I've been here, I've started 1 year, so
Right.
I'm a part of it for 1 year. It's disappointing.
Now, let's get one thing clear. Just because a team was terrible doesn't mean that they count as a disappointment for this video. Here's my criteria. Teams must have been projected to be around 500 or better, meaning that they would have been competing for a playoff seed. Here's the bad teams this season that don't qualify to be in this video. The Saints, Panthers, Patriots, Titans, Giants, and Raiders. Alright, now that these teams are out of the way, let's dive into our first real disappointment.
Lawrence can't get away from the Chicago Bears and Chris Williams.
Back in 2022, it felt like the Trevor Lawrence experiment had begun to pay off. They made the playoffs and had a huge comeback win in the wild card. Then in 2023, they started the season 8-3. But since then, this team has been on a downward trajectory. They finished last season 9-8, missing out on the playoffs. Then going into 2024, all signs pointed towards this season being a make or break for this organization. That's because after 3 years, we still didn't know if Trevor Lawrence was a franchise quarterback. He had some impressive moments, but certainly wasn't consistent.
If he has another season like he just had, I don't think he's with the Jags after this year. I think I said this on the podcast yesterday. The NFL waits for nobody anymore.
Going into the 2024 season, odds makers felt like Jacksonville would be about as good as they had been the previous 2 years. But that didn't happen.
Lawrence on the move, launching down the middle, intercepted.
Through 11 games, the Jags were one of the worst teams in the NFL, standing at 2-9. To that point, Trevor Lawrence had put up his worst numbers since his rookie season. Then, unfortunately, he was knocked out of a game where he took one of the worst cheap shots we've seen in a long time. Shortly thereafter, the team placed him on IR, thus ending his season. And with Mac Jones in the lineup, things have only gotten worse. And it's not just their offense's fault. Their defense has gotten progressively worse over the years, going from 12th in scoring in 2022 to 17th in 2023, and finally, they are ranked 29th in 2024. Overall, it's hard to imagine these guys won't make some big changes come this offseason.
Watson, far side, and that is intercepted. Trayvon Diggs has his first since the ACL surgery.
In 2023, Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year for overcoming countless quarterback injuries and somehow making the playoffs. Joe Flacco was the big hero in the team's late season heroics. But despite his performances, he wasn't going to be able to stay on the roster because of Deshaun Watson. Owner Jimmy Haslam had invested too much into Watson to have a quarterback controversy, so the team geared up around Watson for a make-or-break year in his career, because to that point, most people were out on Watson.
If you are objective about Deshaun Watson's short tenure with the Browns when he's been on the field, it has been an utter disaster. He has been an awful football player.
But even if Watson wasn't expected to be good, this was considered one of the strongest rosters in the NFL. They had a defense that ranked number 1 in multiple categories last season, and the team had enough offensive pieces to feel confident that this team could win in spite of their quarterback, which is why odds makers said that they would win around 8 to 9 games. Instead, it was a disaster right away.
In the air, that's intercepted by Kendricks.
In what was perceived to be the easy part of their schedule, the Browns went 1-6. During the stretch, Deshaun Watson put up the worst numbers in the NFL before suffering a devastating torn Achilles. Also, the defense that was once dominant is now struggling, ranking out in the bottom half of the NFL in most categories. There was a brief stretch of games where the Jameis Winston experience was fun, until the experience went full circle. Overall, there are a lot of major question marks surrounding this team moving forward. Namely, who's going to be playing quarterback for them? Who's going to block for that guy? And how are they going to keep their most important player, Myles Garrett, happy? As a Browns fan, this is all made worse by the fact that Baker Mayfield is totally balling out in Tampa.
But I don't think they're going to be good enough to beat the Chicago Bears, who I think are going to win 11 games, win the division title. I think they are going to be one of 3 teams this year that has a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense.
Williams to the outside, picked off! Jalen Jones! His first career interception!
Prior to the 2024 season, the Bears were media darlings. Everyone and their moms talked about how loaded this roster was, how generational Caleb Williams was going to be, and all the damage these guys were going to do in 2024. Even odds makers felt like they were going to be at least decent, winning around 8 to 9 games and competing for a playoff spot. Also, Caleb Williams was the preseason frontrunner to win Rookie of the Year. The beginning of the season was a roller coaster. The Bears looked rough to start, then went on a 3-game win streak, and Caleb looked awesome. Then, just when you thought they were going to win again, they lost on a Hail Mary, and at the time of this recording, haven't won since. After an embarrassing final seconds on Thanksgiving where the team didn't use their final timeout, costing them a chance to tie, head coach Matt Eberflus was fired. And even though Caleb's stats looked solid down the stretch, a lot of his production has come in garbage time. In defense of Caleb, his O-line has been atrocious and could have been addressed in the previous draft, and they chose not to. As a result, he's taken the most sacks in the NFL by a mile.
He's been sacked the 5th most of any player ever through 10 games of a season.
By the way, the last time a quarterback got sacked this much, it was 2005. David Carr, Derek's older brother. Many people have speculated that it ruined his career. He was never the same quarterback.
Is he a bust? It's too early to say that. Let's just give it some more time, see how they develop around him, see who they hire as head coach, and see how things look next season.
Him lining up right here has been a game changer. You have a 2-way go.
2nd and 8, ball in the air and intercepted. Intercepted by Jordan Phillips.
Life as a Jets fan is pain, pure and simple. 2023 was a season that was over before it started, as Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on the first drive of the year. Even with him back under center entering 2024, it was understandable if fans were cautious due to the injury. But if Rodgers could stay healthy the full season, there was plenty of reason to think that this team was a playoff-level team. After all, they went a scrappy 7-10 with arguably the worst passing offense in the league in 2023. Imagining that team with Rodgers is why odds makers projected the Jets to win 9 to 10 games in 2024. And through 3 games, despite clearly being outmatched in Week 1, Jets fans got to experience what they had missed for so long: solid quarterback play.
Rodgers, the fake, the throw, caught, staying inbounds, yes, touchdown.
And that's pretty much where it ended.
Quick throw, and it's intercepted. Stephon Gilmore.
The Jets proceeded to lose their next 5 games, averaging a measly 16.6 points a game. And after just the 5th game of the season, the team fired head coach Robert Saleh. In an act of desperation, the team traded for Devontae Adams mid-season, hoping this would help spark their offense. And he did show up versus the Texans, helping the team finally win again. Perhaps this was the beginning of a heroic mid-season turnaround. Well, instead, they lost 4 straight. Now, they are guaranteed to finish with a worse record than last season. One of the areas the team was supposed to be good was defense, which ended up not really happening. And although he's looked good in moments, Rodgers is on pace to finish below the league average in passer rating. It's hard to imagine he's going to get any better if he comes back next year, which leaves massive question marks for this franchise entering the offseason, alongside other concerns like who's going to coach this team.
Prescott over the middle, and it's intercepted. It was high that time, and it's picked off by Adebo.
Coming off a 12-5 season, the Cowboys had been thought of as one of the best regular season teams in 2023 before being shocked by the Packers in the playoffs. Entering 2024, outside of losing their D coordinator, there hadn't been a major change to the roster, so there was little reason to think that these guys wouldn't at least be a playoff-level team. But through 5 weeks, there were concerns. The team was 3-2, but they had an embarrassing Week 2 loss to the Saints. With a chance to prove that they were still a top-tier regular season team, the Cowboys hosted the Lions in Week 6 in what ended up being a huge turning point in the season.
Down high over the middle, and it's intercepted for the 2nd time today.
The Cowboys were rocked by the Lions 47-9, which had officially enabled the panic button on the season. And through their next 4 games, they went on to lose all 4 games, and Dak Prescott suffered a season-ending injury. The 2 games following Dak's injury were more of what we saw early, getting blown out at home. Ironically, the team has now turned things around a little bit with Cooper Rush under center. But still, after Week 16, Dallas was officially eliminated from the playoffs. Their number 1 ranked scoring offense from last season has become unwatchable this season, with the worst rush offense in the NFL. The defense has been an embarrassment, plagued by numerous critical injuries. The difference in this team from 2023 to 2024 is shocking. And with the Eagles and Commanders looking strong, you have to wonder what the Cowboys are even going to do to compete next season.
Motion man Hudson. The throw caught. Hudson lost the ball. Looked like a touchdown. Instead, it's a turnover.
Looking at the Bengals entering 2024, they were coming off a pretty disappointing 2023 season where they missed the playoffs. They decided to run things back in 2024 with a similar crew, which was made evident when they franchise tagged T. Higgins. After all, if their offense was clicking like it was during their Super Bowl run a few years back, anything was possible. Well, through 5 weeks, it was clear that there was a problem, and it wasn't offensively. Joe Burrow and company were producing at a high level, which included putting up 30+ in 3 straight games. But at the same time, their defense was playing terribly, allowing nearly 30 points a game through 5 weeks. This was the main reason they started 1-4. And after losing 1 more game, like the Bears, we saw the Bengals begin to turn things around, winning 3 of their next 4. The final of which was a 5-touchdown performance by Joe Burrow. But it didn't matter if this offense was dominant. Their defense proved the following week that it didn't matter if Jamar Chase had 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. They could still lose. And after 2 more losses where the defense gave up 34 and 44 points, this team was cooked. This team went from being expected to win around 11 games to needing a 5-game win streak to finish above 500. Crazy considering the historic numbers Burrow and Chase have been putting up.
So Burrow's the only great quarterback in the league that may not make the playoffs, and he's freaking on fire.
Purdy looking deep, sets up, lost one. That is intercepted. There was nobody there at all. It's picked up by Justin Reed.
After coming up short in the Super Bowl, the Niners were looking to avenge themselves in 2024. After a back and forth of whether or not they were going to trade Brandon Ayuk, they ended up signing him to a big deal, which meant that the most important pieces to this team were back. And they even added a first-round receiver to the mix. Preseason odds had the Niners as the favorite out of the NFC, expected to win 11 to 12 games. But things got weird fast. First off, their first-round receiver Ricky Pearsall avoided tragedy when he was shot through the chest. Luckily, he not only survived, but was able to recover from this and return to the team and play this season. The next thing that happened was just minutes before their first game, Christian McCaffrey was unable to go.
But the Christian McCaffrey announcement coming out of nowhere, that seems like a much bigger deal, because how long is Christian McCaffrey not playing for? Because we didn't know this was even possible there for a bit.
He had an injury that was treated as a minor problem to that point, and he was supposed to play in that first game. Instead, he was not only out for just that game, but for the first 8 games. A major blow to this team considering he was an MVP candidate last season. To make matters worse, he only played in 4 games before suffering a season-ending knee injury. As for the team, they scratched and clawed their way to a 5-4 start. It at least had them above 500, but they certainly did not appear to be the same powerhouse they had been in recent years. And at this critical breaking point in the season to try and make a run, things fell apart. Brock Purdy, an amazing story the last 2 years, had now begun to struggle, and this team just couldn't escape the injury bug, especially at running back, as they were down to their 5th string starter by week 16. Their offense had looked worse than last year, and their defense has been suspect, ranking out in the bottom half of the league in scoring. Of all the teams in this video, their performance has to be the most disappointing, considering how good they were expected to be. Meanwhile, the team that signed their backup quarterback from last year looks like a Super Bowl contender.
Darnold, some pressure, senses, throws, goes in, caught!